Okay, so I'm just gonna start the class now. Whoever's come late, they can watch the recording afterwards. So good evening, everyone. This is our third class. I hope that you have appreciated the first two class and come to recognize that our Zen practice is, it sounds like it's outside of the scriptures and the, the teachings of the Buddha, but it's not. It's outside of what I called academia Buddhism. Okay, it's experiential, so it is very much rooted in the original teachings of the Buddha. Not in the concepts, but in the experience itself. Okay, so that's why I think it's very important to cover the foundations of Theravadan teachings. So, as you know, the first two classes I've covered suffering, the cause of suffering, and the first half of the path to the end of suffering, which is the jhanas. And this class, we're going to cover the other half, plus the end of suffering. Okay. So has anybody read The Island, chapter 9 yet?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so how did you like it?
I got to admit that it took me a bit to get into it in a real way. I read it 3 times.
Oh yeah, it's a short chapter, but it's quite thick.
But by the end of the 3rd chapter, I was completely taken, and I enjoyed it. I thought I got a lot out of it, actually.
So I just asked you to read chapter 9, which is kind of a summary. But if you have time, I highly recommend reading all of it.
Well, I was thinking of doing that once I finally sort of saw the light in the one chapter. I thought, oh, I should read this whole book.
Yeah. So I highly recommend that you read the whole book. So what did you understand from chapter 9 and from what it describes?
Me?
Yes.
I thought it was what I got from it, or almost in a sense didn't get from it, or had cleared up, was this whole idea of the realm of the unconditioned, I think is her
Yes.
Her expression.
Yes.
And and I only read this one chapter, I didn't read the rest of it, but the way she sort of goes into the description of she calls it Buddha's own description of unconditioned reality. Mm-hmm. And I thought I really thought that was helpful. So it's really, this is a bit like Zen, it's easier to sit on the cushion and do it than it is to talk about it. It opened my mind up hugely. I found it a mind sort of clearing experience by the time I'd read it 3 times. And that was around the notion of unconditioned. She listed all unborn, unmade, whatever, unconditioned.
Okay, so now you understand the difficulty with trying to explain something that is completely outside of the realm of normal experience.
Yeah.
That you have nothing to compare it to, because nirvana is outside of any form of regular experience and or regular understanding, conventional understanding of what it is. And it is outside of one's ability to really verbalize it. And so that is the challenge, because when using the word unconditioned, you kind of have an idea of, okay, there's a blankness, right? There's a blankness. And then, unsupported by consciousness is even worse. Well, what is that?
Yeah,
right?
that's when I started to think, well, what am I supposed to do about that?
Yeah. And then some people use the term a non-experience. And then that's even further, right? Because all of our experience is supported by subject-object awareness, right? And when that disappears, it's called a non-experience, right? Because you don't have subject and you don't have object, right? And you need both subject or object, or at least one of them, subject, to be able to have an experience. Okay, so nirvana is described as the unconditioned non-experience or unsupported consciousness. And it's like, the Buddha compares nirvana to this. A turtle, right? Goes to land and then he comes back into the water and he tries to explain to the fishes what land is like. Right? So he would say that there's a place, that's full of space, not water, and you can walk about, and it's less light, you're kind of heavier, and you can feel the wind and things like that. And the fish goes, what is that? you mean there's no thing that you're floating around in? And the turtle says no. And he says, well, there's a hard thing that you walk on. What is walking? and the turtle says, no, there's walking, but there's no floating around. And then the fish goes, no, it can't be. that place doesn't exist.
Well, I thought her the little paragraph where she describes the man describing the university, I thought that was really great.
Yeah.
There's all these buildings, but there's nothing there.
Yeah. So that's one analogy, and the other, the analogy that the Buddha used was the turtle describing dry land to the fishes. Yeah. Okay. And so to the person who's never experienced this, it is impossible to describe, because it's like a fish that never goes on dry land. Right? It is impossible to describe. And so it is not an experience within the normal realm of human experience that people can relate to. Matter of fact, if you experience Kensho for the first time, your mind has no basis, no context to even grasp the experience itself. And the non-experience itself cannot be grasped because there's no subject or object, and you can't record nothing. You can record something, but you can't record nothing, right? So it becomes a very difficult place, number one, to find your bearings and experience it the first time. And number two, if you happen to experience it once, it's very hard to come back to it because your mind quickly forgets what it is, because it doesn't record anything in there. It's a non-experience. Right? The mind needs subject, object to record something. Okay, so it's very, very hard to conceptually grasp that space. You can say what it's not, but you can not say what it is, okay? Because it is an experience that transcend all of the regular, I call it mental functions. So that is one of the difficulty in experience, in describing, for the Buddha to describe nirvana. And so he succinctly gave up in describing it. He would just say it's the end of suffering. So he's saying it's the absence of something instead of the presence of something, because you can't really say that there's a presence of something in that experience. So that's probably one of the best experience. The best way to describe it is to describe it with the absence of things instead of the presence of something. Okay. So in chapter 9, that author is trying to describe nirvana, which is the third noble truth. And the reason why you have to read it a couple of times, because at first it's really perplexing. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
So how do we get there? How do we get there? The 16 types of insight knowledge. As I said, when we practice meditation, we are practicing jhanas to calm our mind, clear our mind, give us the clarity, like a clear lens to be able to observe, right? If you're seeing things through a dirty glass, you know, a pair of dirty glasses, for example, you're not going to see it very well. So the jhanas help to clear the lens. Right? And the deeper into the jhanas you go, the more your ability to observe becomes clearer and clearer and more subtle. You can see more subtle things within the mind. And you can do this while you're in the jhanas, and when you get into up into the higher jhanas, it becomes increasingly difficult to do. Why? Because when you're in the arupas, okay, anything beyond the fourth jhanas, there is certain mental faculties that becomes really non-existent at that point for you to be able to observe things. So sometimes in the higher jhanas, and the higher you go with those jhanas, the only time that you're able to reflect back on those observations with a cognitive process is when you're out of it. Okay, and you come out of it, and then you do the process of what I call reviewing. Okay, that's why I ask you to take notes of whatever you experience, because during the experience itself, your thought process is suspended. Your feeling process in the higher jhanas is suspended. Your sensory process is suspended. So when you get to the seventh jhana, well, guess what? Your perceptual process is suspended. So there is very little way of using those processes to be able to tell the difference. So the only way you can do the Vipassana is when you get out of the jhanas and kick in the cognitive process to, I call it reobservation, to reflect back on what you see. So the 16 stages of insight knowledge was initially was only about 5 or 6, and eventually it got developed over the 2,500 years into 16 stages. And I told you that all of this is very arbitrary. You can describe it in 5 stages, or you can just describe it in 16 stages. So this is not coming straight from the Buddha. This is coming from the Visuddhimagga, which is the commentaries from the 5th century onwards. But this forms the foundation for, I would say, all of the modern Vipassana movements for advanced practitioners. Okay, so the first knowledge from the Vipassana, from the observation practice, and the observation is really important. Without observations, we cannot understand our minds. We cannot understand how our mental process, our internal process works. And the only way to be able to directly experience that is to observe it ourselves. I'm not sure if we can actually, study this externally. So therefore, for the Buddha, the only way to understand it is to have a direct experience of knowing your own mind and how it works. You can't do it on a theoretical basis. Okay, so the first knowledge, when somebody sits down and meditates and they get a little bit of calming and they start observing their experiences, they're coming and going. At first, you're so busy trying to calm your mind, so you don't feel anxious anymore. So you don't feel, mental pain anymore. So you don't feel anxious. So you don't feel sad anymore. At first, you're you're so caught up in that. But once, if you're able to go past that and let go of the need to control your experiences, then your observation becomes a lot more objective and refined. And when things start to become more objective and refined, you get less and less involved with trying to control the damn thing versus actually really understanding it, okay? And this is the biggest major things with meditators is they try to generate states instead of understand states, okay? Because when you're so busy trying to change something, you're actually stirring up the pot. It's like if you're going into the woods and you're trying to observe some animal in their behaviors and the way they live in their habitat and everything, and then once in a while you throw a rock at it or you poke it, right? Trying to make it do things, a certain way, the way you like. Well, that's not a study. You're corrupting it. Okay. So in order to really understand yourself and understand your mind, you got to stop trying to change it. Okay? You got to stop trying to change it. You have to stop trying to manipulate it. And without understanding it, you can't change anything. Okay, so stop changing the damn thing. That's the first thing that I teach in Zen is stop manipulating your experiences. Understand your experiences first. Okay. If you observe your certain experience and you go, oh my God, I don't like feeling this. Well, what you're essentially doing is trying to change your experience. You're rejecting the data. You're going, no. I don't like this data. I'm going to try to change the data. Okay. That is no good. Okay. You couldn't understand a damn thing if you keep doing that. You're a terrible scientist. Okay. So therefore, whatever you experience on the cushion, do not try to change it. Accept it as is. Be curious. See what's going on. And if you have an open mind, an open curiosity, no need to change anything, but just being there to observe. After a while, you're going to see and be able to tell the difference between two things. Okay, what is it? Thinking and sensing, right? Thinking and sensing, okay? So you're going to be able to tell the difference between thinking and sensing, okay? So thinking and sensing, the mental stuff and the physical stuff. And you're going to see how the two are interdependent, but they're also two very separate processes. Okay. So you're going to see, oh, there's a sound. And then, oh, there's an irritation that I have a resistance to the sound, right? That's the mentality stuff, right? I don't like the sound. That's even before you start to think and judge it, right? That's really rough. But there's the listening to the sound, and then there's the I like the sound, I don't like the sound, and then the next part is I get irritated with the sound. So there's the physicality and the mentality, right? And the two conflates to generate emotion. Right? So it's not just what's in your head, but it's sensory experience that comes in, and the interaction between those two. Okay, so that's the first knowledge. The first knowledge. It's when you realize that, oh, there's an itch. I feel irritated that I have an itch. How do I make it go away? And then afterwards you realize, oh, I don't have to do anything about that itch. Right? I don't have to like it or hate it. It can just be. And that's when you realize the difference between physicality and mentality. Okay. So the next part is the knowledge of condition. So you realize that there's two parts in your experience, is the physicality and the mentality, okay? But in the breathing, you realize that, well, the breathing happens by itself. you don't need to force the breathing, and it's you still breathe. Right? So there is a lot of automatic process that goes on without influence from you. And then there's another process, is that there's a programming that goes on with all these processes, right? And you can't just stop it, or you can influence some of it, but there's a lot of conditioning that goes on with the mental and physical processing. Okay, and you come to know that these phenomena occurring from moment to moment, for example, the experience of sensing, hearing and sound outside, attention moves to the sound, and then afterwards, when you hear the sound and then you react to the sound, and then judgments arises, and then emotions arises, and there's a whole conditionality that comes in the process. And then you come to also realize that most of your experiences is wholly conditioned, which means that you are so conditioned to behave in a way that is so automatic, that is like kind of like it happens when you're not mindful, and when you're mindful, it happens. But sometimes you can't stop it. Okay, so there are phenomena that happens from moment to moment without our control whatsoever, and those phenomena can be emotions, can be thoughts, can be sensing external experiences. It can be perceiving things a certain way, or can it be consciousness. And all of these things happens without, a lot of times, much of our influence. It is an automatic process. So knowing that a lot of your functioning is conditioned, you realize that this conditioning is made out of impermanence. Okay, it changes all the time. Nothing is static. There is the mentality, that the belief that things are static, but then there's the physicality and the changing of phenomena. That is what is really happening, right? Which is impermanence. And then you realize the next part is these conditionings are causing you suffering. And if you go further in your observation, you might come to the kind of one of the conclusion that, listen, which one is me? A thought arises, I identify with that thought, it becomes me. The thought dies, oh, what happened to me? I jump onto the next emotion. The emotion arises, oh, it's the emotion is me. The emotions goes away, what happened to me? See, so the constant process of identifying with all these process that come and go, that is impermanence, I don't know, but you should come to the conclusion that, wow, I don't know if all this is me, because none of it seems to stick around. No wonder I feel so insecure, because everything I think it's me goes away and dies down, right? So no wonder I feel so insecure. I identify with everything that's impermanent to be me. And then I'm trying to control things that are uncontrollable or impermanent to be me. What a great way to generate suffering. Right? So that's the next part. And if you go deeper into the jhanas, you start to come to the realization that materiality, form, feelings, perceptions, even if you get this far to probably the 6th or the 7th jhana, you come to realize that sankhara, which is mental formation or just a subtle stirring of the act of will, is all subject to disappearance. So it rises and it disappears. Because before, your mind is not calm enough. So these waves of arising and passing away, that it kind of goes so fast that you're unable to see that process. Okay, so if you sit and is able to ascertain deeper jhanas, you start to be able to clue in the arising and the disappearing of all these, I call it 5 aggregates, arising and falling processes. Okay, so if somebody gets to this point, they're usually in the higher jhanas, that they're able to see the arising and the disappearing of these things. For the Buddha, he taught that you can see these things in the 4th jhana, pretty much, right? In the 4th jhana, things are really still. So you can see sometimes the subtle arising of thought, the subtle arising of feeling, the subtle arising of sensation, and they all kind of disappear into the stillness. So you come to know the knowledge that all of your everyday experiences is a chain of all these happening, arising and falling, arising and falling, arising and falling. It's like watching a movie. Disney, the old way that Disney had kind of made those cartoons is they draw a picture and then they draw the picture, move it a little bit on the paper. They draw the whole series of pictures with little changes on paper, and then they take photos of those things, and then they put it all together into a film. So if they take a stack of paper and they flip it, it generates this illusion of the picture moving, right? And so when you go deep enough in your meditation, you start to see the arising, the falling, and the stopping. Okay, just like you're seeing individual pictures, and that is no longer giving the perception of something moving, but that is just an illusion. So these arising and falling phenomena is giving you this illusion of a continuous sense of self, but it doesn't. It's not. Okay, it's giving you this illusion that you have a continuous sense of self, but this sense of self is derived from things that are coming and then dying out. Things that are coming and dying out. Things that are coming and dying out. It happens so fast that it's giving you this illusion. Okay. So once you come to a point where you experience the still point, where the arising and passing away doesn't happen, you come into the knowledge of disillusion, which is the knowledge number 5. That's when everything disappears. Everything disappears. I don't talk about subject-object awareness at this point. The Vipassana practice doesn't talk about that because I think that they don't really phrase it that way. In Zen, we talk about the subject and object disappears, nothingness. But in Theravadan Buddhism, they call it the knowledge of disillusion. That's when you encounter emptiness. Everything falls away. The arising and falling, the observer and the things that are being observed completely disappears. There's a knowledge of disillusion. So that is where Kensho happens, if you can compare it to the system in Zen. And with the knowledge of disillusion, you first time you experience, holy shit, there was no me around. No me anywhere. Okay, so this illusion of me that goes on with the quick arising and falling of phenomena just completely disappears, because all the phenomena just dissolve and not being around for, I would say, even a split second. Just a split second. You quickly realize, oh my God, there's no me anywhere. Okay, and with that knowledge, you're either greatly relieved because the me is so heavy, so heavy, and such a burden, or you're completely terrified. And I would say most of the time it's both. For me, it was a relief. Okay, I didn't feel the terror because I guess I had many years of reading Buddhist texts and things like that. When it happened, I had context for it, so my mind didn't freak out. Even though it doesn't like the place, but it didn't like freak out the way that most people do. So the knowledge and the fear and terror, that is right after Kensho, or the knowledge of the disillusion. So right after Kensho, the mind just freaks out. It's like, what just happened? I'm no longer me. I wasn't around for a second, right? At first you're relieved because it's such a heavy burden to carry the self. The second part is, oh my God, I'm losing my mind. Well, that's true. You didn't lose your mind per se, because your mind is made up of the self and the arising and falling of all these aggregates. So it's true that you did lose your mind. But to the mind, if you lost the mind, it's a terrible thing. Right? Because if you lost the mind's dead. Okay? It's a terrible thing. It just died. And until the mind kicks back in, it's reborn again. It's going, oh my God, I don't want to die again. Right? So to the mind, when it says, oh my God, I must have lost my mind, it's terrified. To the real you, it's actually a relief. So post Kensho, most people go into the knowledge of fear and terror. I didn't. It didn't happen to me. I was actually completely relieved. But most people go into the knowledge of terror. So they realize that their whole world is completely generated by the mind. Their whole reality is completely generated by the mind. And suddenly everything that you know cease to be in the knowledge of disillusion. And so it is literally the end of your world as you know it. Then the next part is the knowledge of danger. This is the best part that I find that nobody can avoid, okay? Because you're only aware of the disillusion for 1 second. Which right after, if you're a long time Buddhist practitioner, you'd be like so happy like me. I was like, oh my God. But most people, they are completely terrified and thinking that they've lost their mind, which is true. They got into the knowledge of danger, because when you come back to identify with the self again, which is the mind and all these arising and falling phenomena, to the mind and to the self, okay, to the illusory sense of self that you've experienced for the longest time, going into no self is a danger. So you come into this realization that, oh my God, I have no control over any of this. It's dangerous. One of these, it's dissolving all the time. And, that's when you're grasping for dear life. You're at the edge of the cliff, and you're hanging on a vine by your teeth. The guy at the bottom of the cliff goes, what is the reason for Bodhidharma coming to the West? And you don't know what to do. If you answer him, you fall to your death. Right? But you know, while you're hanging on that cliff, you know, there's some bees that you know, made a honey on that branch, and so the honey, you know, kind of drops down the branch into your mouth, and for a minute there, you kind of like tasted the sweetness of the honey and completely forgot the precarious situation that you're in. And that is the experience of the average person. Okay. When you come into the knowledge of fear, come into the knowledge of danger, you basically snap out of it and realize you're hanging on the vine. Right? And I mean you as in the false self that you think you are. Okay. So any moment you're not in no self, you're in self mode. And when you're in self mode, you don't like no self because that's where self goes to die. Right? So what happens is you experience fear and you experience danger, right? Because you become incredibly vulnerable, right? Why? Because you realize for the first time, I have no control over anything. I actually is made up of a bunch of changing phenomena that is very insecure because none of it is set in stone. It's always changing. And what happens is I could disappear at any moment and be in non-existence, okay? And all of these things that I perceive with my mind are actually an illusion. So in Zen, we call this waking up from the dream, right? So once you overcome the experience of fear and the experience of you know, knowledge of danger, of course, at first you identify with that fear and it's terrified of going into no self again because it's really dangerous to the self. At first, you're gonna try to avoid it. Unfortunately, this is true with most meditators. They experience no self and wow, it's great. They enjoy it for like a little bit and then they're like, oh, I'm gonna avoid it. I'm gonna avoid it. Right? So the next part is once you stop avoiding it, you realize that there's no hiding because it's like this. If you were Dorothy and you kept believing in the wizard and then you saw him behind the curtain, you know, doing all his gadgets that gives the illusion of the wizard. Once you see the man operating the machine behind the curtain, you can never be fooled again that the wizard exists. Okay, and this is what happens in the 8th stage. Okay, you started to become disenchanted with your experiences. For the longest time, pleasure and everything that we seek is to fulfill the self, right? To add or on to the sense of self. We seek pleasure. We avoid pain. We do things, achieve goals to add on to our sense of self. But what happens is you start to come to a realization at some point that no matter how much you seek, how much you do, all of these experiences are transitory. Okay, because imagine if somebody stimulates your brain and give you dopamine, right? Give you a high, like taking drugs, and then it feels so good, you want to come back for the same high, except that to get the same high, you have to take a higher dose of drug. Right? So if you're into pleasure seeking, this unfortunately is the result. It is a law of diminishing returns, right? And if you're into pain avoidance, what you'll also find is that the more you avoid the pain, the more you suffer. So both of that doesn't work very well. So you come to realize and become disenchanted with I said, the life that you're leading up to that point. And at this point, most meditators, they're not happy with their current life. They're finding they're disillusioned with their current life. And that's when they have the illusion of, oh, I need to go and join a monastery. Believe me, that's another illusion. You go to the monastery, you'll find that in the monasteries, people are pretty much the same. They're jealous, they're angry, they're people in there have the same dynamic as people outside the monastery. Okay, except they're doing it in a regimented way. So because everybody's practicing there, nobody's enlightened. So chances are you throw a bunch of non-enlightened people together. It's like I don't know, putting dishes in a dishwasher and pile them up. They're gonna knock with each other, right? So when people are disenchanted with the material world, with the pursuit of happiness, sometimes they feel depressed. Sometimes they feel depressed and disillusioned with their current life. But that's one of the things with the mind. With another thing is that the meditator might want to not meditate anymore because they don't want that knowledge anymore. The knowledge leads to them realizing that, oh my God, my whole life has been a dream. I've been building on, I've been building a sandcastle. So there's a danger of the meditator doing two things. One, actually running away to a monastery, which I don't I don't encourage people to do, because you'll be very disenchanted when you're in a monastery as well. Believe me, most people are just not cut out for monastic living. The second is that they might avoid meditation altogether, be reinserted right into the matrix. I don't want this knowledge. Put me back into the matrix. I love that movie. Okay, so, but if you overcome that knowledge of disenchantment, you come to realize that, wait a minute. I'm capable of being able to be liberated here and now without going anywhere. And I'm not saying a conceptual belief that it's happening. I'm saying this is deep in your bones. Okay, at that point, you come to the knowledge that there's no need to seek anywhere. If you can't do it here, it's never going to be done. Okay, and this is an insight that essentially, I would say, is the major turning point of somebody's practice. Okay, some people think that Ken Show is the major turning point. No. I believe that the major turning point of somebody's practice is this part, is the knowledge and desire for deliverance, but knowing that it cannot be done anywhere else but here. Okay. So then you still have desire, but you desire for the end of suffering. You desire for nirvana right here, right now. Okay? And you know that outside of here now, there's nowhere to get it. And this is not a conceptual belief anymore. It is something you know deep down inside. Okay? And for me, I feel that in the Zen practice, until a practitioner knows this part, okay, come to this insight and realization, all of the things that I experienced before is reversible. Okay, Why? Because if you still think there's an escape somewhere, it's reversible, right? If you realize there is no escape, there's only here, and the only place you can find liberation is here, okay? In the here and now. You start to give up all effort to escape. And that's when you start to study the now intensely. Okay. It's when you give up all effort to escape. Okay, to manipulate, to escape. Okay, to be somewhere else, to be to pursue a goal, to go into the future somewhere. You know, this is the real turning point. So this insight comes after deep disappointment and sometimes even depression and disenchantment, you know, from all of the insight that you gained before, you know, coming from all the insight earlier you gained before. And it's when you come out of that and you realize, why am I disappointed that I can't go anywhere? I never went anywhere anyway. I'm going somewhere. So I remember in the earlier days when I was teaching in the Regina Zen Sangha, I always found it funny. Maybe you guys didn't understand the joke back then, but I said, "You're trapped in the now. There's no getting out of the now." When you're thinking, when you're talking about the future, you're actually in the now, thinking about the damn future, right? Okay. When you say talk about the past, you're actually in the now, thinking about the past. Okay. So today you say there's a time change, right? So in Regina it's 5:30, in Toronto it's 7:30. Am I like 2 hours into the future before you? Is Elizabeth, me, and Patricia in a time warp that we're like in the future talking to you in the present? No. I'm not from the future. Okay, we're all in the now. All of these concepts of time, of past, of present, of future, all of that is made up by the mind. Okay, so there is no escape from the present. So when you realize that there's no escape, that's when you come to the realization, the only place for freedom is here. If you can't find it here, you're not finding it anywhere else. So you give up your search. You give up your search for future goal, your gifts. Give up your search for for meaning in the past, and then you get really interested in what's going on in the present. Because you realize that anytime your mind goes to the future, it's kind of anxious. Anytime your mind goes into the past, it's full of regrets. In order to stop yourself from suffering, you have to be in the present. Okay, and if you're resisting the present with what's happening, say for example, you know, you have some pain and you're like, I can't have this pain in the present, you're actually doing yourself a disservice and creating suffering. So there's no escape. There's no escape from experience in the present. Okay, not unless somebody knocks you out and you're unconscious. So there's no escape. So when you come to this place, the next part of that is you come to the reflective contemplation. So you start to study the present more and more, and then you start to understand all the process of your mind, of your body, of your emotions, of your perception of the present, of how your mind creates reality in the present all over and over again, how it causes suffering in the present, how it is delivered from suffering in the present. So you understand deeply the characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and no self. With this development of this knowledge, now this is not different than the earlier insight, but it's a deeper insight, because what this insight brings is that you have a confirmation, okay, and clarity of these things in the present, because you're no longer seeking a result in the future. You're no longer identifying with the components of mental and physical manifestation. And so you realize that when you don't identify with those things, something happens. It's called cessation. The end of suffering happens. Okay, when desire stops and the identification with the five aggregates stops, the process of, it's not that the process of the self doesn't happen. You stop identifying with it, so it stops connecting. Okay, it's just happening like something roll by, it's clouds rolling by and things like that. So it's no longer a trap that causes suffering. So being able to see deeply and closely these processes, appreciate it so clearly that you have no way of controlling it anyway. Control is an illusion. It happens anyway. The only thing you could do is not identify with it. Right? That's probably the only control you have. Okay? And how do you not identify with it? I think Megan can answer this. How do you not identify with it?
You just be like,
you give up. You give up trying to control anything.
that's the trap.
Okay. Basically, you give up wanting anything, trying to control anything, and you learn to accept everything that happens. The funny thing is, the mind always goes, oh, if you learn to accept what happens, isn't that resignation? No, it's not. Because resignation is a position. It's a point of view. Resignation is, oh, this is so terrible. Okay, it's actually a cognitive point of view. That's resignation. This is different. This is complete openness, accepting whatever arises, and not controlling it and not adopting any particular point of view. Okay, it's not resignation. So once this happens, you gain what is knowledge of equanimity about formation, which means that you can watch the arising and falling, and then be in complete stillness. Complete stillness. Complete contentment. It's like, oh my God, I just failed my test. Oh my God, I just, declare bankruptcy. Here's the line, it's the hand that just shoot, sign, the paper is there. There's just the signing, So all the arising and falling of phenomena is experienced as the ultimate now, without constructing reality, with meaning and all that stuff. So you come to experience life deeply as is. You come to see life and reality as is. And you stop searching. You stop searching to escape. You stop searching to be something. You stop wanting things to be different than they are. And the funny thing is, when you stop wanting things to be completely different from they are, stillness arises. It's sort of like stillness in the jhanas, except you're experiencing it in everyday life. So if you have emotions, great, enjoy the emotion. And it doesn't stay very long. You're no longer disturbed by the emotions the same way. If you have painful experience, enjoy the painful experience, and it goes away pretty quickly. So this experience of knowledge of equanimity of formation starts to come. And that's when you start to learn to ride the wave of life. Okay? Ride the wave of life. Be in flow. My dog. So, what happens next? When you start to live more and more in the present, to be in this flow of life, to flow with the changing condition instead of resisting it, to appreciate the changing condition instead of trying to control it. The funny thing is, life starts to help you out. You will find more and more that life is like an easy thing to do instead of it being so difficult. Okay. So you understand, you come to understand how to be in nirvana, which is the knowledge of equanimity of formations, how to be in the flow of life, how to be in cessation of suffering. And you start to understand the practice. And the real part of the doing of the practice, it's the embodiment, okay? It's how you embody these practice. It's no longer a concept, okay? And all of those concepts sometimes even become pretty meaningless to you as you kind of go through these experiences. When I first practiced meditation, I was very much into the books. When I can show, I realized, oh, this is so neat. I still refer to the books to kind of reference my experience. And with the falling away of more and more and more of these stages, it comes to the point where it's, you know, I still like books. I still like these things, but I find them pretty not so useful in the practice anymore. Because the real practice is life, is living it, is appreciating it, is being in every moment, is you know, being with the flow of things, you know. So I just received a news recently. I had a second interview with the University of Western Ontario on Friday, and during the interview, they asked me a lot of questions. There was 3 professors interviewing me, so it was like, I can see why most people get very nervous during these interviews, because you got like 3 professors asking you questions. But the funny thing is, I really enjoyed the whole thing because I was not concerned with the result. Because before that, I actually had an offer from McMaster to go to their program. I passed their first interview. I have passed the interview at McMaster. So while I was having the interview with the University of Western Ontario, I mean, I made the professors laugh like crazy because they were asking me questions and I just answered them kind of succinctly. They asked me, so you have so much experience, you know, with doing volunteering ever since you were like in high school, throughout your whole entire life. What drawn you to all of this? And I said, to be honest, when I first started volunteering, I just want to get out of class. they offered me to get out of the class in the afternoon, right? To go to the hospital next door and volunteer there. So I was like, I was so bored in class. I just want to get out of class. And then the more I did that, the more I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole being there and doing stuff and helping people. And afterwards, and then at a certain point, I started developing this self, identity with more awards that people gave me during the volunteering. It didn't help. and the last award I received during my volunteering times was the humanitarian award for the University of Western Ontario. And somebody asked me a question. It was a big gala that night, and I danced with one of the professors there, and he asked me a question. He said, do you know the reasons for you doing all of this? And then I came to the realization that I did all of that because I was seeking approval. I wanted people to tell me, how good I was, how charitable I was, what a great person I was. And then I thought, okay, that's not so very altruistic. That's pretty selfish, right? So I came to the realization that doing things should be the act of doing things, to do generous things, should be rewarding in itself, in the doing itself. And that goes in hand with the practice of Zen. At this point, the knowledge of conformity or adaptation is when you realize that there's no badge to get. Right? You won't get an enlightenment badge. you won't get a I'm special badge. Matter of fact, you come to the realization that you're really ordinary, and there's no badge to get. There's no destination to get. There's no checkbox to tick, and there's no awards to be won. When you come to this knowledge, the practice itself is the reward. I don't know if that makes any sense. Okay. The practice itself in every moment is the reward. It's instantaneous. And this is the knowledge of conformity of adaptation. Okay. And you come to understand fully all the teachings of the Buddha before. You don't have to understand it before, but once you start reading, you're going, oh yeah, I did that. Yeah. So you're like, oh, so somebody put it in that kind of format. Okay, that's fine. I've experienced that. It's like you went to Paris and somebody wrote a book on, the tour of Paris. So they'll describe the places you've been to, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I recognize that. Yeah, it's kind of like that. And you read another book where somebody describes it a little bit differently, and you're like, oh yeah. It's the same. I experienced that. So at this stage, this is the experience. Okay. It's no longer restricted to a map, to description of a single person. Matter of fact, you have the appreciation that it can be described in so many different ways. It's the same thing, right? Okay. And the practice itself is the deliverance. Okay. And the next one is the knowledge of the change of lineage. At this point, it's a little bit subtle. I want to read up the exact description of the author here. At this stage, the mind stops taking formation, okay, sankhara, the conditioned existence of mind, matter, and its object. Instead, the mind takes the unconditioned and the signless states of nirvana as the object. What does this mean? When you get to the seventh jhana, your concentration is on emptiness. Emptiness is the object. The problem is when the observer looks at emptiness, it collapses. So I don't know how you describe that, but emptiness becomes the object, okay? And the subject. So at this point, awareness is no longer trying to attach itself on the sensorial experience, on the object that it's seeing. For example, I'm looking at the cup here. So awareness is no longer looking at this as an object. It sees signless object, which means that there's no label to this. There's no definition. There's no separation. There's no even like unity. Unity is when you look out and everything's you, right? That even collapses, okay? It sees this as nothing. Okay? Does it mean that I walked into the wall? I don't recall any of Zen masters that I've met that walked into the wall because he thinks the wall is nothing. Right? But the description fails at this point. But the meditators no longer see the world the same way. I mean, Michael described to me one time when he gets out of meditation, he walks a dog and he sees a tree. But the tree is not actually really the tree what he thought he was seeing. It's such an amazing thing, but it's not labeled as the tree. That's what it says here. The knowledge of the change of lineage is at this stage, all things appear with full clarity and emptiness. And it's a weird place to be because it's so strange. When you're out of it, you don't remember it. If you write note down, during the time you're in it and take whatever, but unless you're in it again and again, then you can tell the difference. So what happens is that you don't see life the same way anymore. And for the Theravada practitioner, they think that this is people when people get into stream entry. As I was saying, Mahasi Sayadaw is in the tradition of the commentaries, not in the tradition of the original teaching of the Buddha. So the commentaries sets the bar this high, that 1 in a million people attains it. So after a while, people stop trying to attain it because it's too difficult. But the Buddha sets the bar like this low. So for him, stream entry is Kensho. Right? So for the Buddha, it's accessible to everybody. And so then most people would agree that it's easier to practice. So you see everybody getting it. So obviously I can too. That's one of my criticism about the commentaries is that over the years they set the bar so high that very few people meet it, and then everybody gives up trying to meet it. Which is kind of useless. Right? And that's where you get Pure Land Buddhism and other sector of Buddhism, and you do 110 an eight prostration every day just to overcome your condition and purify your body and mind because you have too much karma. Oh God, oh brother. It's just not that great. I mean, this is one of my pet peeves about the Theravada commentaries. Okay, so I don't agree with them that stream entry happens at this point. Stream entry happens at number 5, which is knowledge of disillusion. Okay, for the Theravada Buddhism, at the stage of stream entry, personality view starts to disappear. Skeptical doubt. What's skeptical doubt? The doubt that you can't do it. The doubt that this might not happen to you. The doubt that is Buddha's teaching actually real? So the doubt of the past, that's skeptical doubt. because you experienced the path already. So you no longer doubt it. Personality view. You no longer see yourself as the same person from 5 minutes ago. I'm talking about 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, of course, you're not the same person. But even 5 minutes ago, you're not the same person. Even like 5 seconds ago, you're not the same person. Why? Because you see all these rising and falling, and your mind identifying with all these rising and falling to shift from that's me, that's me, that's me. Right? It's got this manic, kind of way to keep identifying with things that pop up as being me, right? And make it into this experience of the self. So you are no longer fooled into believing that there is a fixed self. There is a self to begin with. So the next part is the attachment to rites and rituals. Now, many people think that rites and rituals means, you hit the bell, you bow, you chant the Buddha Sutra, you offer flower. No. Rites and rituals is your habit. Your habit, your everyday habit. Vietnamese people wake up and have coffee in the morning, and their coffee is like espresso. So that's their everyday habit. I'm from Vietnam. Ever since I was 5 years old, I saw all my family does that, so I copied them. Okay, but so rites and ritual is your everyday habits, your modus operandi, your way of functioning. Okay, and before you hold on to them, as something very dear, right? This is the way life's supposed to be. This is how it's supposed to be, right? Or the other view is, oh my God, I'm trapped in this. How do I get out? I can't get out, right? But then you come to the realization that this is mutable. All of this is a result of past conditioning that's constantly changeable, okay? Changing. And actually, when I accept them, I'm able to change them, which is very weird. And if they don't change, it doesn't matter, because they don't really cause suffering in myself. But what I found most of the time is there's a significant change in a person's modus operandi at this point. So 3 things is have a breakthrough at stream entry. Number 1, the view that the self is something permanent. Okay. Number 2, doubt in the path, and doubt in the teachings. Number 3, attachments to rites and rituals. And I also mean attachments to your cultural way of behaving, right? Before you're like, this is the only way. Why isn't everybody doing this? And then afterwards, you're like, no, actually, there's so many ways to do it. And then it's even better. You probably don't hold that view for other people, but you hold that view for yourself. Right? And then after you're like, wait a minute, I don't have to do this. At this point, there's a sense of freedom. There's a sense of freedom. Why? Because you're not constricted. You're not constricted by all of these mental, emotional programming, right? Now, let me tell you the difference is that until you come to realize Kensho and then stabilize after Kensho, this is not going to be a reality, okay? So you have to realize it and stabilize it. Okay, so the other stages have to happen before this. But for me, when Kensho happened, this happened very quickly because I've practiced probably 10 years, 13 years before that. And I did all the studying. So Kensho happened, and this happened to me right away, dissolving really fast. For some people, it might take longer, but normally I find somewhere between 3 to 5 years. Okay. But for me, this happened right away after Kensho. I mean, it didn't take any time out at all for me because I've been meditating for 13 years before that. So with this knowledge, you come to realize the teachings of the Four Noble Truths is so valuable. It's so correct. And that everything that the Buddha taught can be embodied, like in your bones, in reality that you experience. The next part is knowledge of fruition of stream entry. The knowledge of fruition of stream entry will last a little bit. You actually have this joy that arises. Oh my God. It's actually great for my world to end. It's actually great for me to wake up from the dream. It's actually great to not have a self, because the self is such burdensome. And every time you enter cessation, which is what I described earlier, nirvana, you come to this realization. And if you remain in nirvana for a day or more, this is the stage that you realize is the fruition, right? I experienced this probably a couple months before I start teaching Zen. My teacher told me to teach. So early when I first came to Regina, probably in March or April of 2009, where I experienced a full day of being in cessation, in nirvana experience. And when I experienced the full day, I was like, oh wow. It's one thing to experience for one moment. It's another to experience it for a full day. That's when you go, okay, so now this is what non-suffering looks like. That is cool. Right? So you're not actually, Kensho is for one moment, one split second. It's like somebody gives you a whole cup of coffee, right? And they give you a little spoon, a little teaspoon of it, and they put it into your mouth, one drop, and then they take it away. And you're like, oh, what just happened? This really wonderful cappuccino with whipped cream, right? And the fruition knowledge is when you're tasting it, you're drinking the whole cup. You're not having one drop and going, oh, what just happened? Right? So when you're absorbed in it for a whole day, you're like, oh, wow. So this is what the fruit is like. And when you realize that this is what the fruit is like, you actually have more confidence that you can actually re-enter it again. So when you come out of it, okay, I'll tell you about my experience. I was in cessation for a whole day. I was walking, talking, doing stuff, going into a meeting with the Insight Meditation community, talking to Chris Real Boy, meeting people, having tea, and nothing was moving. Everything was completely still and clear, and nothing was moving. And it was out of this world. And then I go home that night and my mind was still observing the whole thing, going, it's like it's enjoying, but it's not having a feeling, which is weird, very weird. You can enjoy something and not have a feeling. And then as I was laying my head down to sleep that night, a thought arises. Oh my God, I did it. And boom, I identify with that thought. Bam, the next morning I woke up, it's gone. morning I woke up, it's gone. I'm like, whoa, no. If you could believe, it was like losing heaven. Okay, it's like you are ejected out of heaven and kicked into hell. I remember I went to my cushion, I sat, I faced the floor, and there was a deep disappointment in me, and a part of all my whole being, my whole body just goes, no. I sat there for a long time. Then finally evening came, I picked up the phone and I called my teacher. And I described what happened to him. And I said to him with a very disappointing, dejected voice, I lost it. And you know what he said and you know what he said then? He compassionately laughed at me. He said, if you didn't lose it, you'd be the walking Buddha, silly girl. And he said to me, he says, why are you feeling dejected? You know exactly how to go into it now. And I said, yeah, but it's so difficult. It literally means that I was willing to get stabbed by other people, hurt by other people. It's like being really vulnerable. And my teacher said, well, unfortunately, you know how to go into it, and there's no other way. There's no other way around it. Right? And that's the short and the end of it. So you know how to get there? Then you have to continuously choose to be vulnerable to life, to be vulnerable to what is. And let me tell you how I got into that one day of flow, of cessation. I got into that one day of cessation right after I got off the phone with the investigator of my professional body, who's investigating into a complaint of a client with me. Because I was heavily identified with my career, right? At that point, I've been working in my career for like over 10 years. And totally in fear, avoiding to go through that process. And when I was on the phone with him, suddenly I had a realization, I can't control this. I can't do this. So I'm just gonna open up and tell the truth. Whatever happens, happens. If I lose my license and have to change my career, great. So then I just like totally just relaxed, and I just told him the truth. And it was very vulnerable. It was very uncomfortable. But as soon as I put down the phone with him, I walked into the hallway, and the whole room just spins. And then the whole, it's like there's an energy that goes right from the back of my spine, right out of my head, woof, right on out of my, top of my head. And then there was peace. Basically, when Eckhart Tolle talks about the state of surrender, that's what he meant. Okay. It's you surrender to life. You accept things as they are, and you offer no resistance. So I would say I would have to thank God that my trial to surrender was a lot less than say Jesus, who has to surrender to being nailed, right? That's a lot harder. But basically, that's what it is. You have to be completely vulnerable to life, to offer no resistance to whatever happens, and be completely in alignment with truth. And that's when you realize the fruition of stream entry. Okay. And when you realize the fruition of stream entry, you know exactly how to enter it again. Megan, since the last time you had flow for a day, did you experience it again?
No. Well,
are you sure?
No, I'm not sure. But
I remember you told me a couple of times you did.
Oh,
probably forgot it.
the date, but it I guess what I can say is that it's different when you like, when you feel it in bits and pieces, because I first experienced it, right? For
Mhm.
like a couple hours, like it's very different. But then, like now that I've had this like extended version,
Yeah,
I that like the bits and pieces don't feel
the same.
the same.
Yeah, but they're still bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So you know
It-
how to enter them again.
yes.
That just answered my question, right? The question is, it's not how long, it's whether you can enter it again.
Yeah, I guess it's like there's like just because they feel different, it doesn't feel like it did before. So it's like, is it there? Yes, actually it is, but it's not.
Maybe the first time the dosage was so much that it feels different.
Yeah.
That's what I've noticed.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so then you come to the knowledge of reviewing, so you know how you got into there the first time, and you know how to get in there again. Okay. How long you're going to stay in there, it's a different story, but you know how to get there. So Megan, you know how to get there. I know you know how to get there because you told me how you got there. Okay. So that's when you become a once returner, is when you go, oh, I actually know to go in and out of this. Okay. Might not be long, but I actually know how to go in and out. And you start enjoying, the coming and going of all these manifestations, but you don't really identify with it. You don't really try to hold it. You don't really try to sustain it. So you let the impermanence just become impermanence, including, all these emotions of fear, of whatever arising. As soon as they arise, you recognize it for what it is, and you see the disenchantment with it. So it's like a quick process of all of these things. When McMaster sent me a kind of like a letter to offer acceptance, I felt as soon as I, send them the acceptance kind of email online, I felt a high. I felt like I was walking on air for the morning that I did that. Why? Because, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been studying really hard to get to this point. And last year, I worked on so hard to do all those applications in order to land one acceptance. And literally, I was feeling high. I was running over and hugging my mom, and was smiling and things like that. And as soon as I had that experience, I also noticed this is a very disturbed experience. Right away, I noticed this is a very disturbed experience. Most people would see that as, oh, that's great. I'm gonna ride this for as long as I can. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, this is a very disturbed experience. Right? So there's a dissatisfaction with even sense pleasure. Okay? With sense pleasure. Most people seek this kind of pleasure, you get a nice dopamine rush and all those chemicals cocktail. So this brings me to the next part, which is it's very hard for me to date and fall in love now, because every time that cocktail kicks in, I'm like, this is like not stable. For most people, they're seeking that, right? They're seeking that, I call it chemistry. But for me, it's like, oh, there's a dissatisfaction that I can see with the sense pleasure arising, that it's kind of like the same side of a different coin. The other side is avoidance of pain, and this side is pleasure. But the pleasure, it also causes a little bit of anxiety. It's the same physiological response as anxiety. So then when you're at this point, you become very disillusioned with seeking sensory experience. Okay? When you stop seeking sensory experience, when you stop becoming what you call the reward seeking, we are all motivated and built and conditioned to be reward seeking. And if you stop seeking reward in the future, you stop seeking the future. You stop seeking dopamine rush. There's something that is so beautiful in the present moment that you kind of appreciate what is here and now. And that in itself is the reward. Does that make sense? So then next part is, for a point of time, I was kind of like, how do I get back to that flow state? So you replace all the sensory experience, all the normal stuff, with the new object of pursuit is nirvana. One day I went to bed and, I was kind of still observing myself, and I was like, I'm not in nirvana. I'm not in nirvana. Because, I would go in and out of cessation like this. And the longest I've been in cessation is like over a week. And then one day I was like, wait a minute. If I'm seeking nirvana, I'm still in bondage. Why? Because if I'm still seeking nirvana, then I'm not free. I'm still seeking. It's a subtle form of seeking. So the next part, where I think this is the most important part of the Zen practice, is the end of all seeking. Is the collapse of all seeking. So in a non-returner, they know how to go in and out of nirvana. They have the knowledge of how to get into flow state, into the nirvana cessation. And a non-returner can get into it at will. Okay. They're no longer, they have let go of the first three, call it fetters, things that are binding you, tying you down. Number 1, personality view. Number 2, skeptical doubt. Number 3, attachment to rites and rituals. Number 4, ill will. What's ill will? Resistance. Resistance to life. Okay. And number 5, desires for sensual pleasure. So when somebody tells me, desire for sensual pleasure, does that mean that a meditator should not engage in sex? No, I don't believe it at all, because that's not what it is. It says the absence of desire for sensual pleasure is the desire, not the actual experience itself. So you happen to stumble upon the experience. Somebody, gives you a cheesecake, right? You're like, oh, thank you. Reality is somebody just gave me a free cheesecake. I'll enjoy it. So you'll eat the cheesecake. But if halfway when you're eating, they come over and they go, I'll take it. If you're going, wait a minute, give me back the cheesecake. That's desire for sensual pleasure, right? You're unwilling to let go. You want it. But if they take away the cheesecake and you're going, oh yeah, maybe that person needs a cheesecake more than me. That's the non-desire for sensual pleasure. You see the difference? So many people mistaken this. And until you get to this point, it's very hard to explain it. Okay, it's very hard to appreciate it. So if you can have, all experience come and go. If you can have it, if it, kind of like the flow of life happens to present it to you, great, enjoy it. If it's not if the flow of life takes it away from you, bye. Don't be attached to it. That is the no desire for sensual pleasure. Okay, so that defines the non-returner, where they are no longer, number one, resist life or try to push away experiences. Number two, grasping, desiring experiences. So there's two things. Okay, so once somebody becomes a non-returner, life becomes, how do I say it? More like a surfing, like channel surfing. You just enjoy the surf. It's not that they don't get frustrated sometimes. It's not that they don't, have all the emotions that human beings have emotions, but it's quite temporary. It doesn't really bother them. And when you no longer even desire to be in nirvana, then you become an arahant. And the arahant has destroyed all of desire to be born in a material world, which means that, your desire to be experience sensory pleasure, desire to be born in immaterial world, which is the desire for all the jhanic states on the cushion and the experience of cessation, has destroyed all conceit. What's conceit? The association of me, myself, and I. Okay, so if you do something, good for other people, great. If somebody gives you an award, you start identifying with it. Piece of paper, right? That's conceit. So you're claiming a concept on top of an act, on top of an object, on top of well, you're claiming and attaching to a concept, and making that self. That's conceit. Okay, so if you're identifying as the concept of husband, wife, friend, professor, if you're identifying with those concepts and seeing that is you, if you identify, as a good person because you did all those good things and you be people please, that's a concept, that's conceit. If you even identify yourself as a Zen teacher or a meditator, that's conceit. So the destruction of conceit, the self-reflective mechanism, and this is very subtle, the self-reflective mechanism, it happens really subtle, it's very subtle. It's very hard for meditators to see this part. And I'll go more into it in the next couple of talks. The reflexive mechanism of conceit is totally destroyed. That part is the most important part of the meditation practice that the Buddha taught. Restlessness. You know what restlessness is? Boredom. What's boredom? Sensation seeking, right? So that disappears. Ignorance. This is the major one. What's ignorance? $1 million question. What's ignorance? Anyone?
Ignorance is bliss. So ignorance is at the beginning when you are free of any expectations or labeling, or ignorance is the beginning.
Ignorance is non-clarity. It's your mind in mindlessness. So basically, to be an arahant means you're completely aware and mindful all the time. Does that make sense? So this is the classic description of the 16 stages of insight. Any questions? Sorry, this is a really long topic. Any clarification questions? I know some of you are a little further on these 16 stages, and some of you are a little earlier on these 16 stages. After this class, you should have a pretty good idea where you are. Okay, if you sit and reflect on your practice. Again, these stages are very arbitrary. Somebody decided to put them in stages and they describe it a certain way. And I would say the only one that is really meaningful that I see that is really obvious is the stage of fear. Oh my God, my mind's melting. That is the one that's really obvious, right? The other ones are not as obvious. I find them more holistic, you know. It's not clear cut. Sometimes these things creep up on you. You don't even know. But the one about fear and danger is really, I guess because most meditators come to me when they're at the stage. That's when they text me, you know, late at night and going, oh my God, my mind is going crazy. That's why for me, that stage is really obvious, okay? But all the other ones are not. So do share where you think you are at. Don't be shy. It's not conceit to be able to say, you know, I might be here or I might be here.
That's your question out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Lois, so when you were in a state of cessation for the day and interacting with people, were you acting weird? Like, did people think you were acting differently, or did you seem just the same as? I mean, it was hard to tell, but I mean, like would I find you different, or?
When the very first day that I experienced that, my partner did say that I was a little more quiet. Less chatty, but when people are around me, I was still chatting. But he said I was chill. That was the word. I was very chill. I don't think it's that much of a difference right now. I mean, my personality is pretty much kind of like, over the years, it kind of meshed with that experience. So I mean, I experienced it I experienced that uninterrupted for over a week at one time, I think in 2018. But I'm always going in and out of it constantly. So I can't really tell the difference if things change or not.
Function, yeah.
Yeah. I can't tell the difference between, you know, me outside of it or me inside of it. So
you said something to me that well, I don't know, to be frank, it was a little disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like when you said, you know, when you get to really higher states and you have the cessation of pleasure, and like, so it makes it difficult to date and stuff like that. Like, I mean,
You know what's funny? Most people think, like, when we are born, society gives us this construct that we have to grow up, we have to get married, we have to develop an identity as a wife or husband, or, you know, things, all of those things like that. When I was a kid, I asked my mom, I said, you know, so I'm a kid right now. I grew up, I finished my education, I get a job or a career, I get married, I have kids, I raise my kids, and then they grow up, leave the house, then I retire and get ready to die. Is there anything more than that? And my mom says, no, there's nothing more than that. Everybody does the same. What the Buddha saw was that you don't have to live by that mold, okay? There is a place that you can find happiness completely independent of that construct and still being able to go through life with complete satisfaction. So there's no condition to this, the nirvana experience of satisfaction. I think for most people, because they're so identified with that construct, that they think, okay, there's no other way to live except that. Okay, and I grapple with that problem for a while. And what I find is that it doesn't matter. If you have a spouse and you can experience nirvana with the spouse, that's fine. If you don't have a spouse and you don't feel driven to get into the relationship because actually you see the whole courtship thing as a chemical cocktail, and it's true. You study psychology, you know, the whole attraction process is very much a chemical cocktail. And you see all of the perceptual changes that goes with it, and you see all the attachments to you know, things that goes with it. You become disillusioned with the whole process, but at the same time, you have this incredible contentment, okay, that you can be by yourself or you can be with someone without the chemical cocktail, and you still be you'll still be happy. Okay, so I'm not saying that, you know, you have to be a certain way or you have to be certain this way, but I'm saying that there's a point in your practice you're going to find more happiness in nirvana than anywhere else. Okay.
I mean, the way I'm thinking about it now, I think that like the reward of, you know, having a true lifelong love and having children was so great, that would be, I'd rather have that than nirvana.
Yeah, because you
Rather
don't
would
know
have had that.
Well, but the thing, because you don't know what nirvana looks like yet.
Yeah.
Right? We can't really judge if we don't, you know, we haven't tasted every dishes on the table, right? So I would agree with you probably 10-15 years ago. I would agree with you, but the more I am into the practice, the more I'm finding that there's almost nothing that can substitute with the experience of nirvana.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to compare. I mean, I'm thinking
I don't know, Megan, what do you think? People who have Ken showed already. I mean, you tell me.
I mean, I think for me, it's how do I say it? Nirvana's better, but you know, like I have a very loving partner. Like I'm in a committed, loving relationship, and you know, part of what I had to learn, though, you know, I think to get to an experience of like a flow state was like non-grasping towards that person, right? That I
Yes.
like, so it's like he's there.
It's like being in a relationship while not having a relationship.
Yeah, so it's kind of like this weird thing where it's like, because once I let go of the grasping, this fear that he would go, or like, which was, you know, layered in a bunch of other things for me, but this, once I let go of that, then I can experience sensation, and then I'm like, okay, I have both, thanks. Like, but it's not really both, because I don't have this, like, I love that he's here and I love spending time with him, but it's
I love that he's here, but if he's not here, it's fine too.
Yeah, it's essentially that.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I'm comparing this to is mother love, which is like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, that's gonna be pretty hard to top.
Ellie, you raise your hand. Where are you, Ellie?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just wondering, like, so is it possible to have both? Like, are they not contradictory?
The funny thing is you don't have both because you're not grasping either.
Yeah. Just like at what point a few months ago, I kind of, yeah, well, it's more personal, but I kind of got scared that I would get to a point where I would not like love my boyfriend as much as I used to if I continued like on a meditation path.
You know what's funny? You actually love everybody, not just your boyfriend.
Yeah, but there's something like less special about it. Because I was getting like those moments where like I feel, I don't know, like I felt like more distance with those emotions. And I was just like, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I find that the experience of being in nirvana actually it makes everything okay. Being in a relationship, it's okay. Not being in a relationship, it's okay. Personally for me, most people when they're not in a relationship, they kind of seek a relationship, and I kind of don't seek anymore. So it's very different, and so most people get into relationships for the wrong reasons. If you know what I mean. And so I personally find that I'm totally content with it or without it. It's not one of those things that it's not either or. It's yes, if it's here. If it's not here, yes. It's a very, very, very different place, right, Megan?
Yeah, it really is.
It's hard to describe. It's not hard to describe. So you have a fear that, oh, I'm gonna experience sensation and nirvana, and then I'm gonna leave my spouse, and I'm gonna go to, or my significant other. I'm gonna go to the monastery somewhere. Nah, it's not gonna happen. But if your significant other leaves you, it's okay too. Okay, that's unavoidable. You can't control those things, right? And I think that's more important than anything else. I mean, my mom's cat died. Okay, when she went to Vietnam a couple of years ago, the cat was really old, 16 years old. It started getting sick, and I took it to the vet with my brother-in-law and my sister. We rushed it to emergency, and the cat died right in front of me. And we know that cat for 16 years. It was a part of the family. And I was standing right at the office, in the vet's office. I think, the vet came out and she told me the news. And as soon as she told me the news, I burst out crying. I mean, I cried. I just didn't kind of cry. I cried my eyes out there. And my sister and my brother-in-law was standing there, frowning, going, oh. Right? It was just like experiencing that emotion in the moment, right? I just cried. And then when I finished crying, it was just surprisingly not that long. We went home, and I noticed that afterwards I didn't feel sadness anymore. I mean, that kind of cycle just completely come, and I allowed it to just happen, and it was no longer there. So I watched myself for the whole week after that, and it was completely gone. So I think you live more fully with life when you're no longer grasping, attaching, repressing, pushing things away. Okay, it's not that you don't have emotions, you don't have the experience of life. Matter of fact, you have more experience. You experience more the fullness of life. Okay, and so my brother and sister, my brother-in-law, my sister, they were so sad a week after. because at that point they were repressing their emotions, you know, oh, it's inappropriate to have emotions in front of the vet, you know, you know what I mean? And they were still sad a week later when my mom came back, you know, and things like that. But I was not. That's not to say that you don't have, you know, experience of life. I mean, you actually have more fullness of life. So I think all of this fear is coming out of a mental conception of not actually experiencing those states. Okay. I mean, Michael, you experienced that with a tree. I mean, that's not, you can describe it now. It's not like you own the tree, but it's not like, you know.
It is like you can pass every single day the same way and never see things, and then one day something happens and it's like a miracle. You see, and you have a realization that you actually see that thing for the very first time in your life.
Now imagine that if you experience every moment of your life like that. How fresh is that? You see what I mean? So when you see that tree, you're passing by and your mind's going tree, 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 tree. Until that day, the mind is completely shut off with that and you see the tree for the first time. Now, are you living your life more fully when you're seeing things for the first time all the time versus seeing a rerun in your mind? And that's going to be what I tell people. A relationship, what's a relationship? A relationship is a concept in your head. Okay, that you own that person, or that person has to be a certain way. Whereas a real relationship is to accept the person fully as they are in front of you. That's a real relationship. Not some concept that you're projected on them. So let's see, in my life, maybe somebody stick around long enough for me to see them all the time. But I don't really have a concept of relationship. Eventually, the more you practice, the more you're going to see all those things fall away. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
One time you told me, and I thought this really stuck with me, and so I thought I'd offer it out to others in the group. You said something about, we were talking about relationships and even just people that you're around, and you said something that if you want to be free, you have to allow everybody around you to be free. And I think that that's, you know, like we come to our own freedom by not trying to control others or make them fit into certain molds, like partner or my child or whatever. And I think that can be a very helpful thing to remember, is that when we try to control others and make them fit into a certain mold of what we think they should be, that we're trapping them and we're trapping ourselves too. So if we want to be free, we have to allow others to be free too. And that can mean the relationship continues, the relationship doesn't continue. That's not,
that's more on the surface. I'm going to say you're still, you know, that's true and that's not true, because the truth is that's all conceptual.
mm-hmm.
Reality is non-conceptual, which is there's no idea of a relationship. There's just the person in front of you. There's just this. Okay. So, you know, allowing everybody to be free. The truth is you're always free. You just don't see yourself being free because you believe in your mind that you're not free.
I think one of the things that people are, and sometimes I maybe am getting caught up with, like that coming into nirvana and just being, still being married, still being a mother. Like, these are not a mutually exclusive things, right? Like, and I think sometimes people have this
No, I don't experience life like that, to be honest. I don't experience life as a child, as a mother, as a friend, anything. There's just this. And because life is not conceptual, it is here. Okay, it's what you see in front of you. It's and if you think about things, you know that you're thinking about things. You're no longer deluded by those concepts. Okay, the ability to use concepts, fine. Don't believe that they're true. So the concepts of I'm a mother, that's my child. I am, a wife, and all of the biases or the concepts that are associated with all of those concepts. All of those things are prisons you built in your mind for yourself. Okay? Reality is always free. You've never been in prison, and you don't allow other people to be free because they're always free anyway.
They are. But I think sometimes we trap ourselves with our own constructs continuously.
We trap ourselves with our own construct continuously, and we delude ourselves that we have control over other people. Let me tell you something. You don't even have control over yourself. You sit down, you meditate, and good luck trying to get your mind to calm down. Actually, when you stop trying is when they actually calm down.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any control? No, you never did anyway. So it's not like, oh, I don't have any control, so I'm just going to do nothing. No, it's not like that. There's something in front of you can do. But then the result of it, you don't know what's going to happen. Right? So you don't trap yourselves. You are deluding yourself. You're deluding yourself. Because everybody's free. And already. Okay. So including yourself. And you know what? I'm going to talk about this in the next class in detail. What really, not the next class, I think the class after, which is, what enlightenment is actually like. Go into depth about what nirvana is really like. And so the truth is, we have all these concepts and we live in these concepts, and they are just a tool. They are just a tool. The problem is we can't differentiate anymore whether they're a tool or they're real. And that's the difference. That's the difference between a person who's awake and who's asleep. Matter of fact, for me, there's no concepts of enlightenment and there's no concept of non-enlightenment. For me, there's no such thing. I don't even prescribe to the concepts of enlightenment anymore, of awake, of deliverance anymore, of liberation, even suffering and the end of suffering. I don't live by those concepts anymore. It's a weird place to be honest. But it's a nice place. It's a nice place to be, because it's very different and very ordinary. So if you can appreciate that, you can see the tree for the tree as they are, and you can see people for them as they are. And I think one of the practice in doing this is being a teacher. Because let me tell you something, if you want to be frustrated, become a Zen teacher. Right? Because it seems like everything you do is trying to help people to end their suffering. But the truth is, you know that everything that you do to help people to end their suffering is actually useless because they have to do what they need to do to end their suffering. You're not doing it, right? And so you don't know when they're going to end their suffering, or maybe they never will. But then you still have to do it. I mean, if you're a high school teacher, at least you know every year some of your students are, going to the next class, right? At least they're making progress. But as a Zen teacher, you can see somebody standing still at the same place for years, and some of them backslides. No guarantee, right? And so Darren keeps saying, I chase Millen away. But the truth is, you want to learn non-attachment, become a Zen teacher. Okay. Anything else? Any questions? I think I went over time too much. Today's a very long class. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope this class is helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I say just last technical stuff. Behind Michał, there is a Buddha statue, and actually we feel that it should go, yes, it should go somewhere further, because this is the Kensho Buddha statue.
Yeah, everybody who's kept it has Kensho.
Yes, so if somebody would like to receive that, we would be more than happy just to send it over. Montreal.
Everybody who had it had Kensho.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so just the thought that I just send you. Whoever is interested, just please give us the note, whatever. We'll be more than happy to send it over.
I know, it went to your house and both. It went to your house and both of you can shoot.
Yeah. So
I think
what?
It was Lotus's, then Millen's, then yours. Is that how?
No, it was me and Millen, and then Kim, and then them.
Yeah. So, I am not fetishist, but it works.
I'll take it, but it might be at my house for a while.
You never know. We were thinking the same. So
I think you Kensho before it even made it to your house.
Did you? I don't know.
yes, I Kenshin before, but after it was Michał, and I was thinking Michał would never ever Kenshin. So, and there you go.
Man, Michał, vote of confidence, eh? Wife. Zen stick.
It's just a concept,
Yeah. So just give me, whoever wants it, just, it's free to go.
Yeah, I think that Buddha has a lot of good energy. Okay. So thank you, everyone. And I know it's a lot of patience for you to be with me every Sunday. So I appreciate it. And Michał, thank you for the Dana. You have a sense of humor. So after I thanked Michał for giving me the was it the water pot? So he gave me a water pot as a good luck kind of gift after my interview with McMaster, and he said you're going to use this when you go down there to move down to Hamilton and live at student residence. It'll be useful, and it turned out to be true. So after I told Michał that, he sent me $100 and he says education fund. He told me how that I got accepted. So thank you very much. I appreciate the sense of humor. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Night.
You.